Hello, everybody. This is the WeThePeopleMeet.org weekly meeting. It is October 7th, a little past 12 o'clock noon, and we have several people on the line, Rob Crawley and Kent Bowman. I think we'll probably do most of the talking. We have others joining us, and anyone who joins can feel free to jump in, and it's meant to be a shared conversation, and all opinions welcome and all opinions respected. Even if we disagree, we respect each other's opinions and um, love this time each week to talk about political issues without feeling that my views are being looked down upon. So thanks, Kent and others, for providing me this opportunity and joining. Last time we were talking about a book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. We've invited those that are part of this meeting or anyone to read that book. It's a book about the Council on Foreign Relations and how that got started, etc. We got to about page 34 last time, and so I wanted to start there unless anyone else has something they want to start with. Um, as we have had very little suggestion as far as topics in the past, then I just took liberties to say, let's read this book and see what we can talk about with it and see what we can learn from it. So we've been reading that book. Kent, do you have any thoughts before we dive into that?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. I've taken notes on the book, reread it, and just want to start with kind of just a summary of what I read and maybe talk about whether we believe what's been said or whether we've seen evidences of it, or if we question it, we can look further into it as a group and say, okay, well, this claim by the book may be true or may not be true. Let's look a little deeper and see if it is. So far, it seems pretty documented. They do have documentation at the end of the book. And there's another book called Shadows of Power that I've been listening to online that corroborates a lot of this by a different author, but a lot of the same conclusions. It's a little more detailed than this book. This one's kind of a short book. It's only 130 or so pages. It's a quick read, but there's other authors that have gone more into detail and documented even further. But so last time we were on page 34, we were talking about the different way to look at a political spectrum, um, and we were going to move on from there. Socialism, with the point of pages 30 to 34, was, in my opinion, was that socialism is opposite of free enterprise and enriches the elite while pretending to do the opposite. So that's kind of what the book claims. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ken? Do you feel like that's an accurate statement by the book, or do you feel like that's arguable?
Well, I think it's in general accurate. I do think free enterprise, um, or sometimes the synonym for that is capitalism.
Hmm.
Um, it, it can result in the same outcome, you know, if not watched, I guess is a way to say it. For example, if if you were to look today at the U.S. society, and part of the argument I think the book is making, and what you're making, Rob, is that we're not truly living in a free enterprise system or true capitalism. We are moving towards socialism, but assume for a moment that we are living in a relatively free enterprise system. Then you would look at where is all the power residing right now, and you can argue, I think, fairly easily that you take the Magnificent Seven, if you will, the terminology for the big companies that were all of which were originated in the U.S. and they have obviously international operations now. But you look at the leaders of Meta or Microsoft or Amazon, and they are incredibly wealthy people. In fact, I think Elon Musk, is making may become the very first trillionaire very shortly now.
He just passed up 500 billion. First person to hit that mark I read the other day. Anyway, go
Exactly. And so you can see individuals like that in this last election, for example, utilized a lot of that wealth to support a particular candidate,
Hmm.
and that allowed that candidate to get their name and whatever else out there to more and more people and so forth. So you could easily say that this free enterprise system that is creating these billionaires and soon to be trillionaires, they can focus a lot of their wealth to direct the societal direction, if you will, and so, therefore, so they could become elites, even though they may not be socialists. There could be this elite group that comes out of capitalism that controls all of the resources of the country or the world. So that's my only point. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that it could come in that other direction as well.
And it has. I agree with that 100%. In fact, this book, as it goes forward, it goes into those that got rich by capitalism. Um, the Pretty much all the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, all those people got rich by capitalism, and then they turn and try to protect that wealth through socialism. That's but yeah, even pure capitalism is has its weaknesses, and including, I've had a lot of jobs where I have bosses that make run away with $100 million plus and don't really share with anyone. And I think that is capitalism at its worst. I love companies that share through stock options and profit sharing, that do things like that. And it kind of bothered me to see business owners promise, hey, I'm going to share. If I ever make it rich, I'm going to share with you guys, and motivate their people for years and years. And then they take off and leave them without a job and no bonus or anything like that. I've seen that multiple times. And that is the dirty side of capitalism is the owners getting rich off of all the work of those under them and not sharing any of the upside of the wealth. And I don't agree with that either. I don't agree with that kind of. So personally, I mean, this is more information than this meeting needs, but I always give stock options to my employees. So if I ever hit it really rich with one of my companies, they will get some too. I think that's fair, and I try to do that for all my employees of all levels. But
That's awesome.
anyway, so global, and then the globalists, those that actually did get rich through being capitalists in the first place, and then turned globalists because a lot of times when people get power, they turn to wanting more power. Um, in order for a globalist to consolidate their power, they have to consolidate in the executive branch of government because that's one person. And the way the Constitution has it split up, it's really hard for one individual group or one individual to get full control of the government. As you can see with Donald Trump, he tries to do something there. You've got courts that are checking to see if it's constitutional, checking to see if it's legal in any way. And there's a check and balance. And if one side gets a little too strong, the other ones can push back a little bit. The legislative branch has the power to push back at any time. To the executive power if a president gets too high and mighty. Um, but the goal of according to the book, the goal of these globalists is to put more and more power into the executive branch because it's easier to control one person. So they like to have a government set up like democratic socialism where there's one executive in power in each country that they can control, and that's what they shoot for. And so there has been more power going into the executive branch over the years. Um, and Anyway, the next few pages, 36 to 41, lenders to governments can exert varying amount of control on these governments. So um, a lot of the very wealthy globalists end up loaning money to governments, and through that process they can control them because if anytime you are borrowing money from somebody, they have some sort of control over you. And that is the author's argument is that once lenders lend money to governments, they start exercising control in those governments. And can't interrupt anytime you want. I'll keep reading through until you interrupt, and feel free
I,
anytime.
I, the only comment I would make there is again agree. There's an interesting relationship between lenders and borrowers. and the amount of influence between the two can morph dramatically based on the situation. You
Mm.
know, originally or initially, everybody thinks, well, the lender has all the power.
Mhm.
And that's what this would be saying. You know, the lender has the power. You know, if you, the borrower, don't do what I say, I can restrict future lending to you, and then you won't be able to accomplish your goals.
Yep.
And so you have to agree with me. And then similarly, and I've seen this in my business career, sometimes the borrower can exert, unequal pressure back, where they say, you know, I owe you, $10 million, and I can eventually pay you back with the business I'm running or whatever. But if you start to clamp down on me, then I will declare bankruptcy, and and you'll be out, right?
Yep.
And so sometimes the lender has to be a little kinder to the borrower, even though it may not be fair. But in general, the lender typically does have the upper hand, but it can go the other direction as well.
Yep. And one point, I don't know if I put this in here. Let's see. An important point with lending to governments is you can, if the governments are levying taxes, then they are very, very safe investment because all they have to do is raise taxes, charge more taxes, raise the tax rate, whatnot. And so many times lenders want to lend to governments. It, has some more security than other lending because the governments, if they are unprofitable or bring in less money than they spend, they can always change things to make sure they can pay their bills. So anyway, then the next point is through the same pages, the Rothschilds have encouraged war in Europe and the United States during the 1800s because they were one of the main lenders to governments in that time. And they found that if they funded war, then they would be able to lend more money and make more interest and make more profits. So they would encourage both sides of wars, oftentimes, and including lending to both sides of wars, till they would escalate. And by that, they would increase their lending to very safe investment, which is governments, and that they documented several wars that the Rothschilds funded and benefited from and encouraged the wars to happen during the 1800s. Then 42 to 45, the main point of that to me was that bankers and lenders with the right powers can control boom and bust periods in countries. They can loosen up their lending to increase the money supply. Increasing the money supply provides booms and busts, allows businesses to grow when money is readily available for businesses. They can also tighten and restrict money supply by not allowing small businesses to borrow or big businesses to borrow, and uh, and so they can control that. And the next few pages, powerful bankers lobbied and manipulated to form the Federal Reserve so they can control U.S. finances. And that was documented through this book and through the book that I was reading, Shadows of Power. A bunch of bankers got together at a place called Jekyll Island. I think it was 1913 or so, or 1911, somewhere in the early teens, to form the Federal Reserve. And it was a secret meeting because they knew that a lot of politicians were against it. But they knew that with that Federal Reserve, they could place people in power that were part of their group and could manipulate the boom and bust periods in the United States. And they started the Federal Reserve secretly, or I shouldn't say they started it secretly. They formed it in their a plan to conceive the Federal Reserve secretly, and then lobbied and pushed to get it passed through Congress. And eventually, right before Christmas, I think they pushed it through in the end and started the Federal Reserve. And since that time, there have been controlled boom and busts in the United States that have been, and those that are in the know, those that understand, the cycle and can be in the know of when it's going to happen, can benefit from that by selling right before a bust cycle. And so a lot of the insiders have benefited through this knowledge in the past, is what he's saying in the book. Kent, any thoughts so far? Should I plow forward?
We can plow forward. Yep.
Yeah. The income tax was created prior to the creation of the Federal Reserve to ensure the lending to the U.S. would be shouldered by taxpayers. So prior to, I can't remember the years, early 1900s also, there was no income tax to the people of the United States. So we operated for 140 years without an income tax, and a lot of the money was to run the governments was raised through tariffs at that time. I don't know how that all worked, but I just know that there was no income tax at all prior to early 19 teens. And interestingly, I watched part of President Trump's speech uh, to the military, and he is kind of entertaining. He said one of my favorite word in the whole English language is tariffs. And he's trying to do kind of get us back to where we were before, where we were earning a lot of money through tariffs and less through income taxes. So that was interesting. But yeah, they had to start doing paying for this debt through income taxes, and that guaranteed that the lenders would get their money back if it was backed by the U.S. taxpayer. So that was kind of hand in hand. The same people fighting for the taxes were also fighting for the Federal Reserve to start. Um, he mentions in on page 59 that the left had a lot of interest in politics, and the way they got involved at first was they infiltrated the left in the US in the 1900s. JP Morgan bankers put people in place to infiltrate the left. I don't know, if I can substantiate that myself. I know that a lot of leftist policies have been supported by many on the left or on many large banks in the past, but I don't know if that still is the case that they're controlling the left. The US, there might be some evidence of that I'll talk about later. Um, 60 to 66, he says the US getting into World War I was a mistake that was perpetuated by the big banks through propaganda to get us into the war, and he listed some ways that happened there. And and then after that, 67 through 71 talked about how we really helped form the Soviet United Soviet Socialist Republic of Russia, the USSR, or Russia as it was before USSR, because we funded the Bolsheviks who came and overthrew the previous czars. Not we, but the international bankers did. Um, and he went through how that happened, all kind of worked out who was funding Trotsky and Lenin and which banks were helping with that to get a power group in the Bolsheviks that they could control a little bit more. Um, we're we're pushing through this fast. Any other comments? Any questions? Anyone? Any thoughts?
No,
No.
no, go
The
ahead.
USSR was made by the USA by clique of
Rob,
financiers. Yep.
where's this book? What is this?
None dare call it conspiracy.
Okay, that's what I thought. I
Yeah.
just need to read it again.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And then page 76 through 77, socialist movements are fabricated by financing political strife movements that promote socialism. Um, that there's there's a there's a video by G. Edward Griffin called I'm trying to remember what it was called. He did a lot of research back in the 60s about these groups that were funded by the political left and um what was it called? I can't remember now. I'll have to look it up. But where he documented very, very thoroughly that a lot of these socialist movements that caused strife in the United States through the 60s and 50s were actually started by the Communist Party of the United States, as well as some financing people in the left. A lot of these same groups that finance they were promoting unrest in hopes of getting more socialism into the country. Page 77, they talk about the difference between capitalism and socialism is capitalists provide a product to the free market while socialists use and they rely on the free market to choose their product, while socialists use government to force people to use their product. We've heard public-private partnerships. You've got, there's a few groups that are really powerful in the world, and one of them is government, one of them is business, one of them is religion in the past. That's why we really try to keep church and state separate, because historically churches had a lot of power as well as governments. Um, and I would probably add banks to that. But anytime they all work together, it really does provide more of a monopoly. So public-private partnerships, I frown on them personally because I think that they give too much power to and take away freedom to choose for the people, different types of products. Um, in page 79 talked about how a man named Edward Mandell House, who was in the Woodrow Wilson's cabinet or presidency, he wrote a book in 1902 detailing a plan to give world government called Philip Drew Administrator, in which a conspiracy, which was his word, was devised that would promote only those who believed in world government into the primaries for presidency of both major parties. And the House, Edward Mandell House, worked hard to make this vision a reality. Um, he became kind of the one that called the shots for Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson trusted him a lot, used him in policy making a lot during his presidency in the 19 teens, and he became very influential in getting a lot of these socialist things kind of set up. Page 78 talks about insiders fomenting World War I to prepare the way for world government. There's a lot of documentation they mentioned about how these insiders are trying to get a world government set up, and they would use war to try to push people. First of all, they would make money on the war and be able to lend to the banks. And in more recent years, they've been funding they call it um, in the complex, what do they call it? The military industrial complex, where a lot of the friends of these people will make money on selling arms and such for the wars. There's a lot of benefit that war brings to the insiders and to the elite. And they also use that to try to convince the world that we needed a world government. And the reason they want a world government is because that's a way to get complete control of the entire world. That's a vision that a lot of these elitists have had, is to have power in their groups over the entire world instead of just areas. And after World War I in 1918, Woodrow Wilson and Edward Mandell House went to Europe to form a world government through the League of Nations. But the people, as well as U.S. Congress, were not interested in that, and it failed. Um, I know that there was arguments even in our church here in Utah regarding League of Nations. There were certain of our leaders that took a really strong stance against it. Trying to remember his name. Back in the 1920s, one of our church leaders really took a strong stance against the League of Nations, exactly because it takes away the power of the Constitution, which we believe is inspired in the church that I belong to. Anyway, it's in page 79. In 1919, Edward Mandell House met with a secret society called the Round Table, which was formed by a guy named Cecil Rhodes, the Rhodes Scholar, to form an organization whose goal is to propagandize the U.S. people. Um, and out of this group was formed the American Roundtable Group, with its front group called the Council on Foreign Relations. And this followed the pattern in England of the Roundtable Group, having a front group called the Royal Institute of International Affairs. So there arose two groups that a lot of these elites formed, bankers in both Europe and the United States. And the CFR in the United States, Council on Foreign Relations, and the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which becomes a front group to try to affect policy and get us more into socialistic behaviors and lead us more into world government. Um, And the official birth date of the CFR was May 19th, 1919, in the Majestic Hotel of Paris. Its members included the same people who funded the Bolshevik Revolution and representatives from every major financial institution of that day. Um, and that is the start of the Council on Foreign Relations, which kind of, I might want to take a break there. It's getting long and tedious. But the point is, the Council on Foreign Relations became one of the most powerful groups in history, I believe, political groups in history from that founding. And its founding was a group of elites with a lot of power and money that wanted to somehow form a world government and affect policy throughout the world to make that happen. And a lot of I'll pause there and just give you a little bit of my take on that. A lot of the As I've watched politics over my lifetime, knowing that group exists and it has power today and the reasons why it was formed and it hasn't changed its goals makes it so that I have a different outlook than a lot of people on politics when I see things happening. Um, I want to give an example. And then I'll take a break and see if anyone else has any comments. But um, I'll give an example of today. Um, so Kent, you had sent me an email saying, now this might be too long. I'll get into this a little later. Let's a lot of things that happen today that are pushing us to fight amongst each other more, uh, pushing us to move towards more socialism, infighting, and things like that, I think are a lot of fabricated by this group too. And I think their goal still is to become a world government, get us to have more wars, and then have more arguments for having a world government to keep the peace that they can eventually control. They've been very patient um, over the years, and they've had to pull back. George H.W. Bush was a leader in the Council on Foreign Relations back in the 1980s. And he had said he made the slip up of telling the whole world that the reason we went into the Gulf War was to prepare the world for the New World Order, which is exactly what the Council on Foreign Relations, which he was a part of, had said. And that made put a lot of uproar into the country because the whole time they've been saying groups like the John Birch Society were crazy. There's no such group trying to do this, and he came out and said it openly. But um, anyway, there's a lot of our current situation that can be explained by knowing that an enemy has done this. I guess you'd say that there's a lot of the commotion we have in our world is caused on purpose to try to cause upheaval in order to pave the way for a one world government or a new world order. So anyway, I'm going to stop my dialogue. There's with that. Kent, you have any thoughts on it so far?
Well, I I guess I would say, and and bear with me because as this first comes out, it may sound like I'm a little a little bit radical. I
Yeah,
don't view myself as radical, but there there's a difference between a world government and world cooperation.
right.
And a lot of what I read in this book, you could tweak it just a little bit and
Mhm.
say that a lot of what was happening was trying to get the world to cooperate with each other better so we didn't have wars and problems all the time.
Mhm.
And you tweak it the other way, and it's like, well, we want this world government so that we can control it,
Right.
control everybody. Um, I think things like the League of Nations or the United Nations um, are not evil in and of themselves if they are not trying to take away the sovereignty of individual countries.
Right.
If we don't have a place where we can have dialogue among the nations of the world, my personal view is we're destined to war
Right.
because we're not going to be able to talk through issues and problems between neighbors and between others within the world. in a rational way. And therefore, if you can't talk through something, or you don't have a law to look back on as a foundation for how to solve a dispute, then by definition, it turns to violence.
Mhm.
That's the only way to solve it if you can't use the rule of law.
Right.
So my only two bits on this is simply that I don't have enough knowledge to dispute many of the things in the book, that they could very well be true. But
Mhm.
I can also look at some of those things and say, well, how else would you have tried to get the world together? So, for example, one of the charities I work with,
Uh-huh.
that's trying to solve inner city issues and bring, you know, cause people to have confidence and respect for their neighborhoods and so forth, and build them up so that they enjoy living where they're living and have bright futures. Where did we go initially to raise monies to be able to create a framework where we could get volunteers to come in and help? Well, we went to um, wealthier people, we went to companies, we went to um, uh,
Churches too, right?
churches,
Mhm.
all of that, because we could, if we just went to the people I knew in my neighborhood or the people you knew in your neighborhood, and asked for, $10 a piece or something, it wouldn't happen. At least it wouldn't happen very quickly. Not that it's a bad approach, but it's a more difficult approach. And so a lot of what I read in the book of where some of these groups were getting together to discuss, world relationships, you can give it a sinister turn to it. Like I said, you can say, yeah, these were rich people, elite people trying to formulate things in the way they wanted them to, so they could make money off of loaning money to them to fight wars with each other and so forth.
Uh-huh.
That's could very well be the case. I'm not saying it isn't. But I could also look at that and say, these were people that were trying to get people that had the time and the inkling to look at a world issue, a world problem, and try to find solutions that maybe could be articulated through a group like the United Nations, or in the earlier days, the League of Nations. That's my only comment is I can't come to a conclusion to say this is truly a conspiracy that is ongoing and happening all the time,
Mhm.
um, uh, because I can see alternative reasons for much of what happened was happening. In other words, if one example, if we don't have a Federal Reserve System, or in other countries a central bank, um, you know, how could we get to a point where people could trust each other enough to be able to engage in trade without being taken advantage of?
That's a good question. In other words, if there wasn't a currency, well, there's always been currency. I guess I don't get where how the Federal Reserve helps me and you do business. When it didn't exist for the first 140 years of the country, there was still money. It was backed by gold, but I don't get where that's coming
Well, I guess where I'm coming from is the amount of trade that was happening between countries was
from.
dramatically less back in that time frame.
Sure.
Okay,
Mhm.
early 1900s, etc. And and there was a lot of fraud going on. If you go back and read historical writings on this, you would have somebody in France would, ship something to the U.S. And the people in the U.S. would say, "Yeah, we're going to pay for it," and then it would arrive, and there was no real interaction between the countries at a government level.
That makes more sense now. You're talking country to country.
Yeah, country
Yeah.
to
So
country.
so one country could just kind of work with whatever business is delivering a product and say, hey, we're going to support you and not delivering it after you get paid, and we'll just screw over that other country or something like that without an international body.
Yeah,
Yep.
because the U.S. could say, well, our laws here, we're not going to get into the game of helping foreigners
Hmm.
bring lawsuits against our citizens, right?
Yeah.
So the U.S. importer could simply say, "Hey, tough, you don't have any standing in the United States, and we're not going to pay you."
Yeah.
And so then the French would say, in this example, would say, "Well, we're not going to sell anymore to you guys, right?"
Right.
And so there were a lot of issues with international trade that were very inefficient, ineffective, unfair, etc. That having a central bank where you could have a clearinghouse, and the Federal Reserve System allows that clearinghouse. That's when I send money to the charity I work with in Iraq, I
Uh-huh.
have to go through a clearinghouse within the bank I use here and within the bank they use there that involves their either the Federal Reserve System or the central bank. And that gives assurance that the money is going where it's supposed to go and the parties can conduct business knowing that it's going to be fair.
Yeah.
So I think there were reasons, valid reasons, why
Yeah.
we needed a central bank or a Federal Reserve System.
Hmm.
And I could see where people that were trying to set it up were trying to do the right thing by involving the presidents of these various companies. They listed them out there,
Yeah.
in addition to the big banks and so forth. Um, so I could see that happening without there being this conspiracy of a few elites trying to, um, you know, increase their wealth based on that. But at the same time, I'm not saying it didn't happen either. I
Yeah.
don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. So, and I was just compiling a list. I liked where you're going with this. A group like the UN would be helpful if it didn't destroy sovereignty, facilitated trade. What else could a body like that do to, um,
It would encourage the other thing, and again, this can be controversial, but it would encourage some international law. Okay. So
well,
again,
there might be a place for that. I mean, as long as it's not overriding constitutional law in each country, maybe there's some punishments, some trade embargoes or things that can be done or additional tariffs that can be done to discourage bad practices as a group. Maybe there's a group that says, hey, as long as you're doing trade the right way, then you're in this group of kind of like the Better Business Bureau of the world. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or even beyond business per se, like for how many years have we operated with you know international rules of war, right?
Right. Hmm.
We have international war crimes and so forth, where bad actors, the the world came together and said, okay, you can't torture prisoners,
Right. Right.
right?
So yeah,
Everybody,
I like that.
everybody agreed to that. You can't torture prisoners. And
Really good
then
point. Mhm.
what gets scary to me, when I sent that article to you, is we now have a secretary of war that is saying essentially those rules are out the door.
Uh-huh.
You can do whatever you want. We are the biggest, baddest military in the world, and we're going to start acting like it. And we're out there to, our purpose is to cause death. I mean, he used that term, and I'm going, okay, so I can almost guarantee that if we took prisoners of war in the next war that we were engaged in, and our rules of engagement have changed, there's going to be torture. There's going to be killing of civilians. There's going to be all kinds of things happening because the rules of engagement are gone, and he's tired of that. and he used some rather colorful message words to get that message across.
Right.
And so I think there is a place
Mhm.
where an international law that these countries agree to should be honored. And the other example that we talked about a couple of weeks ago is, we're going in and blowing up these boats coming out of Venezuela because they're connected to a drug cartel
Yep.
in international waters without the declaration of war.
Mhm.
And and so if we can do that, then Russia can do that. And if we can do that, then China can do that. And
Mhm.
therefore we're going to see a lot of, no one's going to be brought to a court of law to say, are you truly a drug dealer? You get your day
Mhm.
in court. It's going to be just kill them, and we're just going to say they were, and let's move on.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying, Rob, is yeah, I'm not suggesting that we need a world government and so forth, but I do think we need to have world cooperation, and so do the scriptures.
Yep. Yep. So, one thing that we brought up this week, that you brought up with me this week, is the Guardian article. And I thought that would be good to look at. So I'm going to pull that up and just look at it really quick. And I'll show you kind of, so I do have I have a different view of politics a lot of times than most people that I know. And I'll show you an example of this one. So, oops, that's not it. Where did that go?
You're trying to find the Guardian article.
Yeah, I've actually got the link and I push Control V. There we go. It wasn't copying over for some reason. So the
Yeah.
Guardian article. So I read through this and was like, okay, no dictator or would-be dictator on day one has ever assembled before him in one room and the entire senior officer corps of his armed forces in order to have them belittled as failures and humiliated for their slovenly personal appearance while degrading whole classes serving in the army, navy, and air force as inferior and unworthy. No dictator has ever pleaded for generals and admirals to applaud his remarks, followed by deafening silence. And Donald Trump is used to entering the den of a mob jazzed up with YMCA. And so he's quoting him, I've never walked into a room so silent before. The US president said when he addressed the country's highest ranking military leaders at the Marine Corps base Quantico on Tuesday. Don't laugh. Don't know if you're allowed to do that. He was trying to force some tittering, an old lounge act gag to rouse a dead audience. You know what? Just have a good time. The comedian who felt his routine was bombing before he even began sought to relax the room. Then Trump instinctively replaced the ingratiating gestures with threats. If you don't like what I'm saying, you can leave the room. Of course, there goes your rank, there goes your future. That sounds so harsh, and I thought, man, Trump is horrible. It sounds horrible. And but I will tell you, since Trump started getting into the presidency 4 years, 8 years ago, or no, 12 years ago, 12 and a half. When half of the articles I read are misconstruing what actually happened. And so I went and looked at what actually happened. And have you had a chance to look at that, Kent, his actual speech?
I watched clips of it. I
Uh-huh.
didn't watch the whole speech.
So I watched
But,
most of
but I
it, but
watched I watched this part where he came, like, for example,
yeah,
I, I, when he said, "Don't laugh. Don't know if you're allowed to do that."
yeah.
He knows they're not allowed to do that.
But he put them at ease and said, "Go ahead and laugh." He wanted them to laugh and have a be relaxed. So I'm going to
But
play
but he
his,
but he shouldn't be doing that. I mean, that's
uh,
the whole point of this to me, Rob, is that the military
uh,
is nonpartisan.
right.
By definition, it's always been that way since Washington.
It should be, yes.
It's nonpartisan,
Mm.
and you don't bring up partisan things. The military is there to protect the country. It's not there to pick, you know, pick a party, to
Right.
you know, that's part of the reason for the parade thing that we've never done before, is that it tends to bring in all this partisanship. And so he started this off by basically saying, hey, relax, have a good time. And but by the way, if you don't like what I'm saying, right,
Mhm.
then you can leave.
And he was,
But
but I want to play it though, because I think
okay, play it.
actually showing what, can you hear the volume by the way?
Let me see. I can't hear anything right now.
Good job you're doing too.
You can't hear that?
Fantastic job.
There we go.
Into
Okay.
a room so silent before. This is very, don't laugh, don't laugh. You're not allowed to do that. You know what? Just have a good time. And if you want to applaud, you applaud. And if you want to do anything you want, you can do anything you want. And if you don't like what I'm saying, you can leave the room. Of course, there goes your rank, there goes your future. But you just feel nice and loose, okay? Because we're all on the same team. And I was told that, sir, you won't hear you won't hear a murmur in the room. I said, we got to loosen these guys up a little bit. So you just have a good time. But I want to thank Secretary Hegseth and General Kane, General Raising Kane for a reason, they call him that. When I heard his name, I said, you're the guy I'm looking for. The Joint Chiefs of Staff and so many others in this room who together represent the greatest and most elite fighting force in the history of the world, the United States military. We're very proud of our military. I rebuilt the military during my first term. It's one of the greatest achievements. We had the greatest economy in history, and I built the military. Those are the two things I say more than anything else. And I also kept us safe at the borders. We had very good.
So just a quick comment. He is one of the most arrogant men I've ever seen in my life. He's very arrogant, and that's a fair statement. And but the way this person made it sound, what he described as the tone and the mood of the place, I get a completely different vibe when I actually watch it than what he was portraying. I think he was trying to portray something that wasn't true, and that was my point. I think that the way the author of that article set it up was not ripping on him for his arrogance or talking to people about political things, which he obviously did and probably shouldn't do. There's a lot that he did wrong, but I this is very common that I always see that if I read what someone says happened and watch it, it's a very different mood. But anyway, go ahead.
But Rob, but the
Hmm.
mood, okay, the mood was silence all the way through.
Right, right.
Okay.
As it's supposed
None
to
of
be,
none
right?
of those soldiers ever laughed. None of them ever relaxed. None of
Oh,
them
I heard a
ever,
lot of laughter when he made his jokes. You didn't hear that?
well, that was a pretty big room.
It
Okay.
would have been a lot louder, yeah.
And that's the issue. I mean,
Uh-huh.
the issue is he is, you know, if you happen to be a military person there that disagreed with his politics,
Uh-huh.
and you and he said something, and that person booed him,
Uh-huh.
okay, they know that the vindictiveness will follow. You can see it in the press corps at the White House. If you have a reporter that asks a question that he doesn't like, he belittles that reporter, and he will often say, you're banned from being here, because you're not following protocol. And this isn't a reporter that's, talking over the top of him or screaming at him, or they've just asked a question that clearly is designed for him to have to answer something he doesn't want to answer, right?
Hmm.
And so my whole point with this, and I think what the author of The Guardian was saying here was, if you are trying to put if you're trying to put the group at ease and say, look, I know typically you're not allowed to laugh, you're not allowed to applaud, you're not allowed to boo.
Uh-huh.
Um, you know, I'm going to take those rules away today. Number one, he can't do that.
Uh-huh.
because
As
that's not
commander
the
in chief,
role.
he's not allowed to do that, even as
He's
commander
not
in chief.
he's not allowed
Uh-huh.
to bring in partisanship into
I, well, I agree he shouldn't do that, but
but
as
but
commander in
but
chief, I think he can talk to them how he wants to.
well, he can talk to him how he wants to, but he
Uh-huh.
shouldn't be encouraging them to
Uh-huh.
break with, you know, 200 plus years of tradition that says, I mean, like in the um, addresses in Congress,
Uh-huh.
okay?
Yeah.
Um, when the Supreme Court justices go to that, they don't cheer when he says something they like, and they don't boo when he says something they don't like. They
Right.
are always silent because they are independent. They're supposed to be, and you don't show partisanship. The military is independent. You don't show partisanship. So the only point I want to make is if you go back to where he says, "Hey, look, relax, take it easy. I'm
Mhm.
giving you permission to do that."
Right.
But then he follows that immediately with,
You'll
it
lose your
says, if you
job.
don't like what I'm saying, you can leave.
Right.
But it's going to cost you your rank and your future.
Right. And
That
he
is
knew no one was going to leave. I think that was just a lighthearted moment. I don't,
no, no, no.
you
It
don't feel like it
wasn't.
was.
It
Oh,
wasn't.
uh-huh.
That
I
that
took it
was
that way.
that was a typical threat of his.
Uh-huh.
It's like how many times does he say a joke, if you will, everybody nobody gets it as a joke, and then after it's out there a while, he goes, "Oh, I was just joking,"
Yeah.
and you go back and you watch it. He wasn't joking,
Uh-huh.
and so all I'm saying is, if
Uh-huh.
you're an officer
Uh-huh.
in the U.S. military and you give in to this subtle encouragement to just be yourself, do whatever you want, nobody cares,
Right.
then if you happen to be on the wrong side of that, where you groaned when he said something because you were allowed to groan,
Uh-huh.
they know that they're going to be held accountable for that.
Right.
And so it's unfair. It's setting a stage where he knows it shouldn't be partisan, but he's asking them to be partisan.
Right.
But if they're partisan in the wrong way, then he will carry out his threat.
Hmm. And I
And
hope he doesn't do that. I hope he doesn't take
he's
some
already done it.
subtle, like someone laughing or whatever to fire at the wrong time or groaning at the wrong time to fire someone. I've seen him fire people because they've been working against him as their boss as a commander in chief. But I don't know. We'll have to look at
But
examples.
like within a week of that, or 3 4 days of that event,
Uh-huh.
there was a report on a naval officer that was fired
Uh-huh.
because he said something. Wasn't like, I'm against Trump, I'm against the government, I'm, like he was a radical. He
Mhm.
simply said something like, that wasn't appropriate
Mhm.
in that setting for him to do X, Y, and Z. And he was gone like that.
Interesting. I want to see that. I'd love you to share that with me, and I'll look at that. So, the whole premise of this book is that this group, the Council on Foreign Relations, has a lot of power. They, at the writing of this book, there was 1,500 members of it at the time, and half of them had already served in the government, 700 or so, and many of them in high up positions. What I've been following for literally the last 30 plus years is what the Council on Foreign Relations influences us to do. And since Trump got involved in politics, you've had now they're 5,000 strong, and the Council on Foreign Relations. And Trump declared war on the elitists that are part of this Council on Foreign Relations many times through speeches where he's told them that yeah, he's not part of them. He's not part of their group, and they are against him. And so I'll often look to see, on this article, for instance, I look at the author, former senior advisor to Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, And I also looked to see if he was part of the Council on Foreign Relations, which he is. And Donald Trump has been, I mean, there's plenty you can attack on the guy. Sidney Blumenthal wrote it. He's a member of the CFR, but there's plenty to go after him for. But it has been a concentrated effect of everybody that's part of the Council on Foreign Relations to go against him since he became president. And that is just something that I always look for to say, okay, what's his motivation? Oh, he's part of the council. Of course, he's anti-Trump. Trump is at war with the Council on Foreign Relations because he's the first president that in my lifetime wasn't approved by the Council on Foreign Relations, I believe. He won surprising to them. They thought they could get Hillary in instead of him in the first place. Anyway, go ahead, King.
Well, but I would just offer up that throughout all the argument in the book, it was, well, someone like Richard Nixon was the right person to bring up all these or these pro-socialist ideas because no one was looking for him as a outspoken conservative Republican to be the one to offer this up, right?
Right.
So it was almost like they went and got Nixon because he was the antithesis of what one would expect to bring in socialist ideas. And so if that were true, okay, if that's what happened, why couldn't you say the same thing right now? That sure, we're going to have Trump stand up and say, I'm against all the CFP, CFR, sorry, thank you, against the CFR. I'll say that, but then behind the scenes, I'm going to do the opposite. And again, I'm not making this argument, but you could easily make the argument that
he's part of
the things that we have been doing in the last 8 months have centralized power in the US the most that has ever happened in 100 years. Congress has given up any of its checks and balances. The judiciary is forced to come out time and time again with all of these presidential they're not edicts, what are they called? When Trump
what are those called? I know what you're saying.
Executive orders.
That's
Sorry.
Right. Yep.
We've had more executive orders in the last 8 months than we've ever had in 3-4 times that time frame. So everything is concentrating to where if you're in the education and you're not doing what Trump wants you to do, he's taking money away from you. If you're in the military and you're not doing exactly what he wants you to do, meaning you can't have any women's organizations and things like that, then he's going to go after you and fire your leadership. If you're in the finance world, if you're the Federal Reserve chair and he's not doing what you want, he's going to find a way to try to get you out of that position. If you're in housing, same thing. If you're in environmental area, if you're not going to go along with what he wants, you can't be there. If you're in healthcare, the NIH or the CDC, and you're not following, the new thought process, then you're gone. So it's, to me, we are more socialist in the last 8 months than we've ever been, including, as you and I've talked, all of these investments that the US is picking out in specific companies and therefore disrupting the free enterprise system.
The public-private partnerships. I hate them. Yep.
And they're not even partnerships. They're just, in some cases, they're just taking investments, right? So who's going to, when Trump wants Intel to do well, he may have to come out and say some negative things against you know, Taiwan Semiconductor or against On Semiconductor in San Diego or against AMD,
Right.
so that his investment in Intel can do better, right? It's all of a sudden there's no transparency, there's no fair level playing ground. It's, well, what's the US invested in, and we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yep. I agree
Then
with that.
what kind of a chilling effect does that have on, companies like Google and Meta and Microsoft, where they go, oh my goodness, if we get Trump on the wrong side of us, he will kill our business.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so,
that's wrong for sure. I agree.
yeah,
I agree. And I'm 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 a Trump supporter, but I'm also cautious because I don't agree with the things that go against the Constitution. You know what I mean? I'm not a blind Trump supporter. I
yeah.
I support him mostly because since I was a young child, I've watched people be promoted by the Council on Foreign Relations by the media that's controlled by them, and they're the same ones that get us in wars and further that CFR agenda over the years. And the as this book will point out later, and I don't know if I have it in here, right here. I feel like we have lived in a fascist society. Instead of being one person being the fascist, it's a group called the CFR that is controlling everything from what we think, through the news, through entertainment, through everything. And they have had such a big role in who we get as president in the past, and that I can explain more in the future. But this is the first president. I mean, he was my last choice of all the literally dead last of almost all the Republican candidates because he doesn't understand the Constitution, and because he has an ego and multiple things. But the the media wanted him to run against Hillary because they thought he'd be an easy target to shoot down and lose. That's why he was chosen by the media to run against Hillary, and
But
he
but but
shocked the world when
but
he,
let me stop you just for one second. They're
yeah.
chosen by the media.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
it wasn't just the media.
Uh-huh.
I mean, um,
I can back up that statement, but go ahead.
well, what I was going to say is,
Hmm.
um, why why would Mike Lee be on the side of the media?
In which case?
Well, if you're saying that, that um, what I'm trying to say,
Was he a supporter of Trump before Trump won the primary? Is that what you're saying? He was supporting Trump before Trump won the primary?
no,
Okay.
no,
See, that's what I'm saying. The media chose him up until he became won the primaries, and at that time, I was watching very carefully. CNN had maybe five positive articles a day about Trump until he won the primary because they wanted him to run against Hillary. The moment he won the primary, it flip-flopped and they ran 5 to 10 negative articles about him per day on that very day. That's when it flip-flopped because they wanted him to run against Hillary, but they wanted him to lose to Hillary. So CNN and all the ABC, CBS, all of them did follow that exact plan. And what I'm saying is the Council on Foreign Relations gives direction to these groups on who to promote. And that was very clear in that race because they were given the go-ahead to praise him, find everything good they could about him until he won the primary, and then they were told to go against him. And I was counting one day, I counted 20 negative articles about Trump on CNN's main webpage. Without clicking anywhere, just scroll down 20 negative articles about Trump after he won the primary. And before that, you couldn't find a negative article. They chose him by having all kinds of articles about him prior to the primary and nothing about his competitors. One article here and there about his competitors, but 5 or 10 positive articles about Trump up until the primary. And the reason they chose him, well, part of it came out. Hillary Clinton, part of through WikiLeaks, they found out that she actually said, "I really want to run against Donald Trump." Not that she has the say, because she isn't a leader of the Council on Foreign Relations, but she personally said before he won the primary that she wanted to run against him because she was scared of Rand Paul, for instance, because he could gather the independent vote against her. Um, but she and for sure said that through the WikiLeaks they found that. Whereas they knew they had a lot of dirt on Trump and they thought they could, get her to win over Trump, and they were shocked. He is the first non-establishment person to win that I can remember in my lifetime. And that's why they hate him so bad, and that's why he's being attacked. But I feel like we're in a fascist society in that this group is controlling what we think, and they're all of these groups are basically directed by Council on Foreign Relations members. And if you know that the Council on Foreign Relations was formed to try to get us into a world government, and by these large bankers and kind of greedy people that don't have our best interest in mind, then the picture gets a little clearer. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and again, I recognize that, if then, that's logical, but I still have to challenge some of those ifs, right?
Right, right. And honestly, I'll just interrupt real quick and say, honestly, I'm not here to try to convince you of this. I'm here actually really appreciating you being here because I want to be challenged because I don't know what I believe myself. This is what I've been told my
Yeah.
whole life, and I want someone to challenge me on this. So
Well, and we're in the same boat, okay?
yeah,
I mean, I'm not here saying, I'm any smarter than you are, and in
right.
fact, I'm sure I'm not.
Mhm.
But the
I
but the
think you
bottom
are.
line is that there's a lot of dots
Mhm.
that they're connecting
Mhm.
that could easily also not be true, is all I'm saying.
Right.
It could be.
Have you seen the movie A Beautiful Mind?
No, I've heard about it though. I need to
Yeah,
I need to
there's
see that.
connecting dots that that happens where I've seen it many times. Connecting dots that end up not having a connection.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that goes on.
It's it's like it's that cause and effect kind of thing.
Mhm.
Maybe a bad example, but with the Tylenol and autism, right?
Right, right,
I mean, you've got half the people saying, well, hey, in all these autistic births, the mother was taking Tylenol,
right.
and but that has nothing to do whether it caused it or not.
Right, right.
It
You've got to
could.
have really good studies, and the fact that we haven't, I am skeptical of the medical profession too, I will say, because I have good reason to be but they can and have the ability to do studies that really narrow down, narrow down. I don't remember all the correct wording, but they can make everything else equal except for that, and really get to the bottom of these things. And they've chosen not to over the
They
years.
haven't done it. Yeah.
Yeah, they've chosen
And
not to.
and
It's wrong.
but there's so much of this. It's like, well, hey, asphalt streets always get wet when it rains. So, if you look at asphalt, you say, well, that's because there's asphalt streets, right? That's causing the rain. Stupid, but it's every time it rains, there's an asphalt street in front of my house that's wet.
Yeah,
And my point is simply that, the cause and effect is what I think what you and we don't know for a certainty. This author believes that these members of the CFR are part of that group that's trying to control the world.
you're right.
But there is an alternative explanation, and that is, where do you go? I mean, if you're trying to establish a relationship with other countries around the world, and build some international laws that would be helpful, like the ones we talked about,
Mhm.
or how do we handle international commerce in a way that's fair to everybody? Um, you're going to go to people that have been part of the CFR because they're the ones that have kind of devoted years and years of their lives to these international relation kinds of issues, right?
Right,
And
right.
that's why you could also argue that's why a lot of politicians have come from the CFR, because they're attuned to and they understand these international institutions and relationships. And
Right.
that's not sinister,
Right.
but it also could be sinister.
It
Like you
could
said,
be.
maybe that's they're coming
And
there
that's
because
and that's what I'm hoping that we can kind of hash out over time. Not really focus only on that. I mean, we got a lot of fun things we can talk about each week
yeah.
that are coming up, but this is key to why I am always not in agreement with people. That I hear things, I'm like, well, I know that why this is happening, but they won't get it. You know what I mean? I'm trying to
Yeah.
hash all this out personally too.
Well,
So
and I just want to make one final comment. I gotta run here. It's
yeah,
unfortunate I've got a meeting, but the comment I was trying to make with Mike Lee was
yeah,
simply that when Trump was received the majority of the primary votes, right,
right, right.
from all the states, so he was to be the elected Republican candidate.
Hmm.
Mike Lee worked behind the scenes, and it's all published, and he doesn't deny it,
Right,
um, to change the approach in the convention to keep Trump from getting there.
right,
Okay, so
right,
he went against all the rules of engagement, against the will of the people, so to speak, that had put, and I don't believe that was truly the will of the people. It was the will of the insider group of the Republican Party. Um, but by definition, it has to say that's the will of the people because that's how the people within the Republican Party decided to do it.
hmm,
But the bottom line is he was going to go against the will of the Republican people and the rules of the convention to oust Trump, not let him be the party candidate. And then once Trump made it through that, anyway, then all of a sudden Mike Lee turned and became this absolute fan of Donald Trump and
right.
will
So
do
he's
anything
so
Donald
he
Trump wants him to
he
do.
was he was like me. I didn't want Trump until he got elected, until he got nominated as the through the primaries. But the option was having people that are supported by the CFR that will continue to run us towards socialism and run our country into bankruptcy. And that's what I viewed my alternative was. He was in a position where he could do more about it. And I mean, if he did things that were illegal, I haven't heard that, but maybe you can establish that more, in the future. But yeah, I was the same way. I was really anti-Trump until he won the primary. Then the option versus an arrogant guy that's not part of the deep state establishment that I've seen operating for years and years and years against what I believe, to have someone come in that has a chance to go against them, I was
And,
ecstatic
and
about
wait a minute, he was going against who?
that. The establishment, the CFR, I call the CFR the deep state, the conspiracy, secret combinations
But,
establishment.
but it would have been, but it would have been Hillary Clinton, right?
Hillary Clinton has been a puppet of the CFR, and you can see that. I have videos of her kind of explaining that too. But anyway,
But if that's the case,
uh-huh.
I don't know. It just seems like the CFR would have loved to have had Hillary Clinton win it.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is the first time in my lifetime the CFR choice of candidates has not won the presidency in my lifetime.
And
Um,
why? But again, what I'm saying is based on all the other stuff in this book.
uh-huh.
Why wouldn't the CFR have been able uh, to adjust for that to make sure Hillary Clinton won?
Did you see the look on all the anchors' faces when of shock? I mean, they
Yeah, but
thought
they're
they had
not.
it. They thought they had it won.
But theoretically, they're not the CFR, the anchors.
No, there many
But
of them are.
but
Many of
but
them
why? But
report to those. Hmm.
why couldn't why couldn't the CFR, if they're truly as organized as the book makes us believe, why couldn't they have done more to have Hillary Clinton win it?
I think they did everything they could, and it was a David versus Goliath win, I think. I mean, Trump, and it's hard to say he's not the Goliath because he had so much, power and money. People got to know him through his shows, and everyone liked him then. You know what I mean? But not everyone, a lot of people liked him then,
Yeah.
but he had gotten a little bit too powerful that they couldn't overcome that.
Yeah.
They miscalculated and they've been suffering ever since. I watched a CFR conference the other day where they're just bemoaning that they don't have the power they did in the international community before. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's we'll
But
have to go
it
because
would
I
just seem
got
to me like
messaged.
they could take him out. Like they could have
They've tried to
gotten
shoot him.
Elon Musk. They could have gotten to all these elites out there and said, let's get some additional dirt out there on Trump and keep him from winning this second
Well,
election. And
that video, the way they got that video of him saying inappropriate things was crazy. But yet they found as much dirt as they could. They really did.
yeah. Anyway, all righty.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Rob. We'll
Yeah.
see you next week.
Yep. See you then.
Okay. Bye-bye.